Dracula. Did you actually start a cult?
Maybe.
Okay.
I couldn't tell you if I did, it'd be,
Oh,
because we
okay.
have to keep it all secret.
So that way, because I got the Kool-Aid you sent me, so I shouldn't drink it then.
Not yet.
Not
There'll
yet.
be a
Okay.
time you
When it's
will
over.
receive the signal. Yeah, you'll get the
Yeah.
signal
Okay.
and you'll see the
Gotcha.
sign and everybody, that way we all do it together.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. Yes. I've seen that game before. Where have I seen it? Anyways, as I warned Richard before I started the show, I'm very, very serious as he picked up very quickly.
Dead serious.
Yeah,
I'm getting those just don't mess with me vibes, man. So I'm on my best behavior today. I promise.
Okay, that makes more sense. I'm never on my best behavior, man. God no, I don't even know what that looks like anymore. Jeez. As I get older, I get worse. I don't know about you. Like I'm almost 40. Mm-hmm. I barely give a shit. Like I openly barely give a shit. I'm actually terrified when I'm gonna be like at 50 because I'm gonna hear even less than I do now. Right?
Yeah, you're just gonna be like, I'm done.
I'm there now.
Right?
I don't give a shit. Right? I look at the world and I think the world's crazy. I think I'm right. Right? Mm-hmm. Right, and yep. Doris laughing her ass off already. Hi, Doris. Doris, Richard, Doris. Yes.
Hey, Doris.
Yes, and I mean, I look at the world. It's like we seem to be going to this strange place where it's either take your drugs or be out of the club, and I'm like, that is a very weird world we are about to evolve into, and
right,
yeah, and I don't really want to play. So I think what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to get a van. I'm going to go to a beach. I'm going to surf. I'm going to probably hit on women half my age and not give a shit. And
that sounds like pretty fantastic, actually. Maybe I'll join you. Get a big van.
I just think like this whole concept we have of how civilization should be we've completely taken the left turn of stupid. And I'm not sure how to fix it exactly. I almost think we've hit that point where it's got to play out. But I don't really want to play. What all I really want to do, man, is I want to have a house. I want to have a hot wife, some kids maybe, and write my shit, interview people like you all the time. And yeah, I mean, I don't
Sounds
care.
Like a dream, man.
It sounds like that's it. Like, yeah. No, I mean, we all, like let's be honest, man. I mean, you do a comic called Cult of Dracula. Like I said, that's why the cult jokes are at the very beginning.
Right.
Right. But let's be honest, man. Like, if you had your way, you'd be doing more comics. Like right now,
absolutely.
You wouldn't
I just sit around write all the time, which is kind of what I do anyway. Yeah.
I mean, as likable as I am, and I know I'm a very likable guy, you don't want to be here. You would rather, like, seriously, you would rather. Let's be honest. You would rather talk comics like with somebody, right? You make comics. Probably like me, hit on women at various age groups. I say half my age. You can say whatever age you feel comfortable hitting on. And
sure.
Right, sure, we'll go with that, right? Or, whatever, right? Or whatever. It's the 21st century. Who am I to judge, right? You do you. And honestly, if you had your way, you're like, fuck this shit. Like, just fuck this shit. Right? Let's be honest. Like,
I just check out and write comics and hang out at the beach with my dogs all day. I'd be cool with that.
Yeah,
that'd be a great life.
Like I said, I think we've done this wrong. Like, this is my own like perspective. We fucked up. We care about all this other shit. I'm starting to wonder as I get older, is why are we caring about any of this crap? None of this stuff really matters. Like,
no.
like, look. I don't know if you believe in God, but if there is a God, and we all look at the pearly gates, I somehow think he's going to give very little of a fuck about what kind of medicines I may or may not take in the future. I somehow feel God will not give a fuck. There's just something inside me. He's gonna be like, eh.
Right? That's pretty fair.
Yeah,
I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think so. Now, if you're not a God and it's all oblivion, if it's all oblivion to you, well, then it doesn't really matter anyway, does it? And number 3, like if you believe anything else, are they going to give a shit? Maybe if you're a Hindu. Are you a Hindu?
I'm not a Hindu.
Okay, so you're not a Hindu, so you don't have that to worry about. So
No, I don't have to worry about reincarnation.
Yeah, so I mean, so yeah, I think we just fucked up. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that applies to about 90% of the way we live our lives on this planet. I think we fucked up in so many ways, and we just completely missed the point of the simplest things. So it really, if you want to go a biblical route, it really doesn't get any simpler than heal the sick, feed the hungry, clothe the naked, shelter the stranger. It's pretty simple and self-explanatory there, and yet we can't seem to figure that out. And we're arguing over whether people have a right to go to a doctor, or things like that. It's just silly. So I think you're right. I think we fucked up this whole life thing. We fucked it up, and maybe we'll get another chance to do it better the next time. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just gonna say, fuck it, just live the life I want to live it now. I'm too old for this bullshit. Like I said, I've hit that point. I don't care. Right? I just don't. Now, maybe I'll be an army of one, but I'm good with that being that army of one. By the way, is this more entertaining than any of the other shows you've been on so far?
I am constantly surprised by how many different formats there are for podcasts, and I love you're coming at me with a curveball, so I was not expecting that. So definitely very entertaining.
Yeah, but. I'm not knocking any other show. Mine's better, but still, I'm not knocking any other show, right?
If you didn't think your show was better, who would think your show is better? If you don't believe in it,
Well, no, it's what it comes down to. Like, look, any artist, doesn't matter what your genre, skill, whatever the case may be, we need a little bit of ego. We legitimately do.
Right. A little ego can carry you a long way, man.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You have to have the confidence. Like, look. If you didn't think you had something worth saying, you wouldn't have written a comic book.
Absolutely.
Real quick though, was comics your first love, or did you want to do prose?
Oh man, I can't say comics were my first love. My first love was baseball. When I was a little kid, I thought I was going to be playing. By this time, I would have been in my life. I'd have been retired after a long career with the Atlanta Braves. That's where I seriously saw myself as a kid. So I kind of came into comics a little bit later. My parents kind of tricked me into learning to love comics when I was, I don't know, probably about 8, 9 years old, because they'd give me comic books as a reward if I did well in school, or if I did my chores, or if I played well in a baseball game. So they kind of tricked me into learning to love to read. So yeah, I can't say comics were my first love, but they are definitely one of my longest loves.
So was it a particular comic that made you go, yeah, this is the shit, or was it like an accumulation?
I think the first comic that really opened my eyes and made me say, holy shit, was Neil Gaiman's Sandman. And it wasn't the first volume, Preludes and Nocturnes. It was the second volume, A Doll's House. And then after that, it was Death, the high cost of living. Those they just clicked in my head. And the character of Death. It's not on this shelf, but I've got actually a statue of Morpheus and Death on my little shelf back here. But that character, coming back and living a day in the life of a human to understand what it is that she's taking from the world when she comes to take a life. That was incredibly insightful and very impactful on my young life. Now as I've gotten older and I've reread it, I definitely see that she's the manic pixie dream girl. I see that trope, but it still doesn't change the fact that the theme that Gaiman brings forth in that, it's just incredible. And that Gaiman was probably the first comic book writer that really opened my eyes to what comic books could be beyond capes and tights. It didn't have to be all about Wolverine punching the Hulk, or Spider-Man fighting Doc Ock. It could be, comics could could have a broader commentary on the world and on life, and they could explore different genres. So that was probably reading Sandman. That was probably when I really just decided that I could do so much in comic books, because there's really no limit to the possibilities in the comic book world.
So Sandman came out in an era of just a plethora of amazing books. Watchmen, Dark Knight Returns, American Flag, which is a book no one really talks about.
Love American Flag, yeah.
Great book. Most people do not know how good that really is. I love John Ostrander's both his Suicide Squad and Hawkman runs. You had Peter David's Hulk run, which was amazing. Batman was probably at his very best in terms of storytelling in that era. And so, I mean, I just listed a whole bunch of books, and I don't know where this book that has a very teensy tiny tie to the DCU comes out of nowhere and knocks everybody's socks off.
I know.
Right? And it's like, and without Sandman, there's no Hellblazer. Without Hellblazer, there's no Transmet or any of the other great books that did throughout the years. But Sandman was the first. The thing about death, I think this is the thing, and my own experience in my mortality kind of informs me on this, is I think the cool thing what Gaiman brought to the character death, yes, she's the pixie trope. That was the thing about death. Like most of us, when we look at death, and even today, like especially with the last 1.5 years where people had to deal with their mortality in the face, many people look at it as this terrifying thing. Very few of us actually go, it's actually an odd way. It's a compassionate thing too. And that's and Gaiman as a storyteller explores that concept big time in High Cost of Living, because for death, it's about empathy and understanding. It knocked her arrogance down to something far more humane, right? And you wonder when you get to the very end of the series, like when she takes Dream, right? Would she have been as kind to him at the very end if it hadn't been for that experience?
Right. If she didn't understand what it was to die, would she have that sympathy, that compassion? Would she have been a wholly different person? And so, the ending of Sandman remains one of those quintessential comics that you just have to read, because it hits on so many emotional and intellectual and thematic levels. It might be, and this is just my opinion, but it may well be one of the most perfect comic book series ever composed.
It's up there. It's up there.
I can't think of much that would be better. I really can't think of anything that would be better. But maybe there's some things that are maybe just as good.
So Warren Ellis has an incredibly rad reputation right now, and rightfully so. Not going to say that he doesn't deserve it, but when the dust settles, he's a prolific writer in comics, and from him, Metropolitan, which I mentioned, and I also think Planetary are his best two finest pieces.
Yeah, Planetary is very, very underrated. And Warren Ellis is a brilliant storyteller, and whatever is going on in his personal life, I think it's possible to separate the art from the artist, and whether he's and I don't know Warren, so I can't really comment. I know I believe the women what they say, but the fact that he might well be a scumbag does not take away from the body of work that he's produced. So I'm a big fan of his work. Can't say that I'm necessarily a fan of him, but I know he's dealing with that, and I was very impressed by the way he kind of lately has come forward and wants to open up a dialogue to kind of discuss these things and make amends. I do believe in second chances for people, but that's something that Warren would have to deal with between himself and the women involved. And all I can do is just appreciate his body of work.
Right. Well, okay. I'm of two minds on that one. It's hard because for me, like in the book world, the equivalent to that is J.K. Rowling and Harry Potter right now. Rowling with her stance on the trans movement and some of the things she's said and done. And the fact of the matter is, I think it's a constant reminder that no matter who we admire, there's good and bad in us all. Doesn't really matter. And I think in a world where everything's recorded a lot more, it's one of those situations where we have a tendency to judge way too quickly, and not excusing anything he's done, or not excusing anything J.K. Rowling has done, but I also know this: when they go away, people will talk about them being monsters, but much like every other literary figure in history. And then this is the part that really is torn. Dr. Seuss did some terrible things, but his works are renowned. You can look at Lord Byron, you can look at Byron, you can look at a lot of artists, and we have some monumental flaws in how we present ourselves. And for all of that, we're all human beings, and we all are world class. Like I said, going back to the very beginning, we're world class fuck-ups, all of us. And I'm a fool. I am one of the dumbest people in the world when it comes to women, and I'll be the first to admit that. But it's also one of those things where I'm just like, I can look honestly. It's like, it's harder when they're still alive, because it's almost like you're feeding the monster, and I'm not sure you want to do that. Same token, like, I know Harry Potter's going to be considered an all-time classic, regardless of what Rowling says or does. And same with Ellis. Warren Ellis has made a ginormous impact on the comic book industry, and in spite of everything he's done, he's also the most prolific writer of the modern era. So I mean, it's a very hard thing. Again, not justifying anything. It's just, he's a difficult one to talk about in a good or bad light, right? Like, it's easy to talk about him just in a bad light, and it's going to be very hard to talk to him in a good light for a very, very long time, and justifiably so. But I think the work in the long run outdoes the deeds. I could be wrong. There are probably exceptions to that, but I just look at all the other literary figures. Like, I think the one that blows me away, I loved Isaac Asimov growing up as a kid. Oh, he's one of the biggest reasons women do not have a bigger voice in science fiction. Everything he did to them, I had no idea.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And I don't know if you can. I don't think the work ever excuses what the person does with their life, but I think especially in a literary sense, and especially as time passes, I think you have to make your commentary on the work while acknowledging the person, but maybe the person isn't what you celebrate. Because if we go back through history, the history of art and artists and writers, I mean, they're troubled individuals. They're tortured souls, and they've done some horrible things. And they've done other things that in their day and age were perfectly acceptable that we find problematic today. So I think the only way to handle something like that is to focus on the body of work, and acknowledge what the person has done, but don't make that your focus of glorification. I don't think you can glorify what Warren Ellis or these other people have done, but I think you can still acknowledge the impact of their body of work.
Absolutely. And that's kind of it. We're talking about other great works of all time. Although I think the good run is to be concluded. Saga's pretty darn good. I think.
Oh my God, yes.
Right, and also Alan Moore. Now, a lot of people say Watchmen for sure, but my personal favorite of his is actually Promethea.
Promethea is very underrated. I have to agree with that. Yeah.
And then if I were to make one more, there's one more I just hadn't. J. Michael Straczynski's Midnight Nation is damn good. It's his
great book. It is definitely Straczynski's best work, I think.
Yeah, as a comic. Battle on Five is its own entity. Well, right. Midnight Nation is beautiful. It is literally the best story he's ever told in comics, and it's still he's never topped it. Like, he's tried, but he's never ever topped it. So,
and I don't think he can. There's, whatever he writes, it's always going to be, it's going to be different. I mean, so I don't think he needs to be in competition with himself. He just needs to write the best story that he can write right now. And, everything else will stand on its own. And, there's, no reason that you can't have your own gold medal, silver medal, bronze medal thing. I don't know that whatever he writes next, I don't know that you have to compare it to Midnight Nation or anything that came before.
no.
But
I actually had a thought. I was thinking about that a long time ago. So for me, if you had to pin me down to one all-time favorite author, it's Ray Bradbury.
Mm-hmm.
Bradbury
Yep.
did. Martian Chronicles is a brilliant piece of short fiction collection. Fahrenheit 451 that is the only book to this day that has ever scared me.
It's terrifying.
Yeah, you're kind of in that world. I'm not sure whether to laugh or cry, but we're kind of there. And
Yeah.
Then there was a point, like, when I think there's a point with every writer, you have to be very careful about this, is Ray Bradbury when he was young and Ray Bradbury at the very end of his life were saying the exact same things. Technically speaking, Ray was a little bit better at the end of his life. He absolutely would. He's been writing forever. But there's something to be said about that voice and that raw belief. I truly believe our emotions carry in our work. It's what makes our work sing. It's not what we say, it's how we say it. And so when I look at the end of Ray Bradbury stuff, and like, it's not as good, and it took me a while to pinpoint the reason. And for me, it was he wasn't saying anything new. He was almost doing fan service. There's nothing wrong with that. Hey, Ray Bradbury, you're gonna go do what you want. So when I look at JMS, and I think, and I thought about this. Babylon 5, he said an incredible amount. Midnight Nation, he said, knew something new. But if you look at everything else he's done, is he saying anything really different than he hasn't said before?
Right.
Right. It's a question. I mean, it would be a question I would ask him. Right. Not out of like arrogance or anything, because he's a great writer. It's not the technique, because there comes like, technique is technique, but it's that voice, that thing inside you that says you must express this new idea and new thought, and it's the thing. It's almost like being in love. When you first are in love, you're incredibly passionate about it, and you can't think of anything else. And when you get older, and time passes, you can still love that thing, but you will see it differently, no matter what.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Time changes you, time changes your perspective. That's kind of a recurrent theme in Cult of Dracula. When we first meet Renfield at the end of issue number 1, he delivers a speech. One of my favorite lines from the book is, where we are when we see something is just as important as what we see. And, perspective, point of view, it changes us. And I think as a writer or as an artist or just as a human being, I think we're in a constant state of evolution, and we don't have to hold to the same beliefs that we had as children or teenagers or young adults. We don't have to be who we've always been. Battlestar Galactica, one of my all-time favorite sci-fi television shows. They have the recurring thing. All of this has happened before, and all of this will happen again. But in the final season, Apollo cuts them off. They say all of this has happened before, and he's like, "But it doesn't have to happen again. It's okay to change." You can. I personally in my life, I have known some people who, in their youth, because of the world that they were raised in, held some very, just horrible beliefs. But as they've gotten older and they've broadened their worldview and they've seen people from different walks of life, they've developed a deeper understanding, and they've changed their opinion. And I think we need to remind ourselves it's okay to change.
Oh yeah. No, it totally is. It's the reality of the world we live in, right? It's one of those
Change
things.
is the only constant.
Yeah. And you also love that quotes Nietzsche. Just because the world has always been this way doesn't mean it always has to be this way.
Right.
It might have been the most idealistic thing he ever said.
Yep. Yeah, he wasn't very big on the idealism.
No, but that is probably the most romantic thing he ever said. If you actually sit there and think about what he's saying there, it's like, no, you're absolutely right. Everything can change like that.
Yep.
And I think one of the coolest things about human beings is the fact that we can change like that if we choose. It's actually our greatest power. The challenge is believing it.
Right.
Right. That's pretty much it. That's the challenge. It's interesting. I really enjoyed your take on Renfield. Renfield as cult leader was actually a really interesting idea. I thought of everything you did there, because you did a lot. There was a lot of homage to a lot of cool stuff in the way you were telling that story. But Renfield is like, I thought about that. It's like, that is a cool, that actually fits, because the ultimate puppet would be a good puppet master too.
Exactly. And I loved writing Renfield. He may have been my favorite character to write in the whole script. And it was very important for me to get his voice just right. Because he's based on an amalgam of several cult leaders, the most prominent one being Charles Manson. And if you listen to Manson, and my God, I've listened to so much Manson. I've listened to interviews and documentaries, and I'm probably, well, there's no probably to it. I'm on an FBI watch list because of how much I've been researching Charles Manson and other cult leaders.
But the FBI once in a while, not with them some cookies.
Exactly, they're definitely watching.
Yeah. So listen, Mr. FBI, listen. I'm crazy. I'm cool with it. I brought cookies. You're welcome to have one.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, Manson had this there was a music to the way that he spoke. He it's very clear, that he wanted to be a musician. He understood timing and cadence and the rhythm of speech patterns. And so I really wanted to get that just right with Renfield. And he's, when you read him, he comes off as like a kind of a crazy beat poet. And, he seems to be rambling, and he goes on these long, these diatribes, and uses all these, metaphors and things. But if you really start to think about it, eventually what he's saying starts to make a lot of sense. And cult leaders, they seem to have that ability. Manson was that way. Warren Jeffs was that way. David Koresh, Jim Jones. They had the ability to make the insane seem normal and the normal seem insane.
Well, it's all on how they carry themselves. Most every cult leader that's been really, really successful usually has a high degree of charisma, which tends to draw people to them to begin with. And the fact that, like, even today, doesn't matter how educated we become as a society, some very basic things work on us all. We are all, we all have our moments. A pretty woman smiles at me, I am thinking of ways to how to impress her. That will not change until I'm probably old and foolish. And it may still not change. Who knows? Right? But I mean, that's right. But there are just some things that are fundamentally, just human. And cult leaders had this ability. Like the thing is, especially in a world where there is no nuance, you're this or this. It's really easy to disillusion a very large segment of people who just happen sometimes they have done nothing wrong to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. That's that is often a tragedy of a very absolute culture. Is either you have or you have not. You are us or you are them. And sometimes those have-nots and thems really they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time to look for answers. And when the rational answers aren't giving you anything, if you're just suffering for what seems to be the correct answer, sooner or later you're going to reject the correct answer because you don't want to suffer anymore and you will seek something else.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And a guy like that, it preys on that. But the other thing too, right? Sometimes people go in there knowing it's kind of crazy, but they go with it anyway because there's not necessarily a bet. They don't see another alternative. And when you
it's a place they fit in.
Yeah, that's it. Right, that's how it works, and that's how I mean, not everybody that joins these things blind. They join these things because they don't see another way to go, and you'll see that, and they'll do terrible things, and at the end of the day, they'll question that concept for sure. Mm-hmm. But when you come right down to it, right? How to put this? The disenfranchisement is often the doorway to worlds like those, and in a world like this, it is incredibly easy to be disenfranchised.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can lose your way, and we get to play on that a bit in Cult of Dracula with Lucy and Arthur. They kind of represent. They're really the only members of the cult that we get to know very well. We see other members of the cult, but Lucy and Arthur, we get to see them in an intimate way, and they've come to this place and they've joined this movement for different reasons, and they've interpreted it in entirely different ways. And neither of them were bad people. Arthur carries some guilt for the things that he did in his life as on Wall Street as a hedge fund manager or whatever. But deep down, you can see that he's a good person with a good conscience. Yet, how did he end up in this cult where they do these horrible, horrible things? And that's not uncommon when you talk to people, or you see interviews with people who have escaped from these cults. A lot of the people that escaped from Jonestown, they weren't bad people. They were just normal, everyday human beings looking for a place to belong, and unfortunately, they found that in the arms of someone who is incredibly manipulative and who, little by little, inch by inch, convinced these normal, good people to do horrible, horrible things. I mean, Charles Manson convinced prom queens and high school football stars to go out and stab a woman dozens and dozens of times and literally rip the unborn fetus out of her stomach. How does one person convince another to do that? And that is what has always terrified me about cult leaders, and also about vampires, because vampires have this ability it's not necessarily about what they do and who they kill, because to me, when a vampire kills, that's just like, it's nature's way. Predators hunt and kill prey. We go out and we either go to the grocery store and buy, a pound of hamburger meat that used to be a cow, or some of us go out and hunt and fish and eat that way. It doesn't make us bad, but so it's not what the vampires do, but it's what they can make other people do at their command. And so it was really fun to explore that while writing Cult of Dracula, and to see what people would do to rise in this movement, this cult.
So one of the most profound books I ever read was Sorcery by Terry Pratchett.
Okay, I've not read that one.
So it's okay. Normally, I don't recommend it because it's, of all the Terry Pratchett characters, Rincewind, it only really requires one book to understand. Mm-hmm. If you read one Rincewind book, you've kind of read them all. It's just he is the only character in the entire Pratchett universe that was a one note joke. Granny Weatherwax, The Watch, Death, everybody else, there's layers. But Rincewind's kind of not.
Kind of a one note.
Yeah, he's the one now, and the author knew it, but he also was the first character. So every once in a while, he would just do it. That if that one, if there's any part of Discworld that was completely fan service, it was that character.
Right.
But this book was interesting because to me, I think, and I love the taught me something about fear. So the story is, so there's this hero off screen who's supposed to kill this dragon in Ankh-Morpork. And everybody knows it. They know it's going to happen this way. It's going to be great, wonderful, blah, 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 blah. Dragon wins. Not only does the dragon win, the dragon starts requiring people to sacrifice part of their families and their children, and people started to do it. Good people started to do it. And you watch them do these monstrous things, and they would ask, wow, why are they doing this? It's probably one of the most profound things he's ever said in his books, and he said a lot of profound things in his comedy is, when people are afraid, they will do anything to get away from that fear. Yep. And that is, especially in today's time, I feel that is the journey of our time, is the face of fear. And what it looks like as it evolves through my lifetime, and it's a different face, but it's ultimately the same thing, facing our fears. And I think again, this is what happens is, I actually think Lucy's kind of the victim, and and his name is Angelo or Andrew. I actually I sense Andrew's own self-loathing for himself.
Oh, you mean Arthur?
Arthur, yeah.
Arthur Holmwood.
I felt his self-loathing when you wrote him, and it occurred to me that of the two, he's the real monster, because she's a victim for all she's a lot more aware of what her situation is in some ways than he is. She knows who he is, and good, bad, or indifferent, she's accepted her fate. And that's terrifying considering what you do to her, you bastard. But but he lives. Arthur lives, and he sees, and he watches, and he's afraid. And what he loathes about himself more than anything else on the planet is he's so scared he doesn't know what to do. And he's afraid if he does something, he too will die. And the thing is, what he's forgotten is what Tupac said once upon a time in a rap: a coward dies 1,000 deaths. And you're watching with Lucy dies once. Sorry guys, I'm spoiling this a little bit. Arthur's still dying, at least last time I read the book. I could be wrong on that, but that's my take.
That's actually a really good observation. Arthur is an incredibly tortured character. He carries a lot of guilt with him from his time on Wall Street. He's kind of a representation of Bernie Madoff. How he stole. One of his lines is, he stole money from people who didn't have any and got away with it. And so his kind of act of contrition is, involves this cult, this movement, and it doesn't achieve the catharsis that he hoped it would. And so, I think it's very fair to say that he believes that he himself is a monster, and he is constantly trapped in this this feeling of guilt, and it's almost like quicksand. It's slowly sucking him down, and he's paralyzed by inaction. He sees these terrible things happen, and he's had the opportunity to take action to do something about them, but he's never been able to make himself do that. He can't find the courage. So I think that's a very good observation about him.
Yeah. So like if I had to pick Lucy, well, we'll see what you do. I have a feeling that may not be the last time we see her. I have my gut tells me you got something really hideous planned for her. I could be wrong, but I somehow get the because she wanted something and they gave it to her, and I'm curious what that actually was. As far as Arthur goes, he's going to see all his fears made manifest, and he's going to have to make a decision then. and does he become the monster he actually says, or does he maybe somewhere along the journey remember that he's a man, and even if he does die, doing the right thing when it counts says something, right?
Right. Yeah, I think everyone has within them the capacity to be a hero, and everyone can very easily be a villain. I mean, not to overuse a very overused quote, but the difference between Batman and the Joker is one bad day. And so I think we all have the capacity to do good or evil. And I like, what I set out to do with the characters in Cult of Dracula is I wanted to create characters who felt like real people. And so there's really no black and white. There's no good or evil. There's no heroes. There's no villains. There's people, and we're all of those things. Sometimes we're heroes, sometimes we're villains, sometimes we're brave, sometimes we're cowards. And so, all of these characters in Cult of Dracula, while they do represent certain archetypes that, of people that we'll expect, that you expect to see in a horror story, I think I like that there's no right or wrong with them. Everybody has a personal positive motivation for doing what they're doing, but everyone is also lying about what they're doing. They're either lying to themselves, or they're lying to their friends, or they're lying to the world. So there's just no black and white. There's just a whole hell of a lot of gray, and I think that's the way of the world.
Well, we all have to decide who we are going to be every day. That's the battle a human being has. Sometimes the kindest thing in the world to do is to just let people live and believe whatever they want to believe. Sometimes that's the correct thing to do. Sometimes the incorrect thing to do is to do that. There's a time for the one is right, and there's a time when the other is right, where it's you stay up and speak and do something to prevent any real damage. Again, looking at this time like we're living in right now, it's a very interesting one because we're deciding how we're going to live for the next little while, and it's interesting to me because it's like I'm not sure we actually fully know what that looks like. And my question for me, and this is something I live, is are we going to I've learned that when we make a decision based on what we're afraid is going to happen, it tends to happen. This is a personal observation about life. Our fears always stick around if we make our decisions based on them. It's when we face them that things can truly change. So looking at what's going on in the world today, I question whether we're actually doing that philosophy at all, or if we're actually just letting the dragon have its children. Right. And I'm not sure I like the answer to that question because I just want to, again, I told you, I think we fucked up 90% of the world. You tend to agree with me. Now, you may disagree with me on this, but I look at what we are trying to change into, and my big fear is that we won't change back. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe in the short while, it's a good thing to do it this way. But I've learned a long time ago that once you give power away, it's very hard to get it back. So so for a guy like me who's thinking about this in a bunch of different ways, it's like, you might have a point right now. I'm not sure you have a point 2 years from now, but do we leave? Right? And if the answer is no, is this the world we want to be in? Now, eventually we'll crawl out of it, but we might not crawl out of it making this decision now we might go this way for 10 or 20 years.
It might be a generation, or 2 or 3, before we can circle back. I mean, we're making some very existential decisions about who we are as a people, and what we're going to be moving forward. So these are very, very crucial times in our world. I don't know what those answers are,
No.
but
This is certainly I mean, we're not going to figure this out in a 1 hour and thereabouts podcast. We're just not.
right.
But it's interesting to me because that's the thing. Like maybe it is the right choice, but what I wish in a time like this, and maybe this is maybe me being completely foolish, is that when whatever decision we truly make, we make it without fear.
Mm.
Because I think that's
And just go.
Yeah, because if we make it with fear in mind, we're going to never leave.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the truly terrifying part of it to me. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It does. Sometimes we, and kind of circles back to Arthur in Cult of Dracula. Sometimes we let our guilt and our fear of repeating the mistakes we've made in the past, sometimes we allow those things to hinder our ability to make necessary decisions that could move ourselves forward. And, I agree. You can't make a decision based on fear. And you can't run away from things all the time. Sometimes you do have to stand and face them. And sometimes you have to deal with the consequences of the choices that you've made, because there's no such thing as an easy choice. And that was another theme that I wanted to explore in Cult of Dracula. There's no right or wrong answer. There's just choices, and no matter what you choose, there are going to be consequences. Someone is going to be hurt and someone is going to benefit, and you just have to make decisions. And the characters in Cult of Dracula make decisions that will, sometimes quite literally result in people losing their lives. That's a big burden to carry around. This isn't one of those stories where there's a Deus ex machina that swings in and saves the day and everybody walks away with sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows, because that's not the world.
No, it's not the world, and that's spoiling too much. You kind of give away very early on that this is not ending well for anybody.
No.
Right.
No. If you, I'll quote George R. R. Martin: "If you think this has a happy ending, you're not reading the story."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there is no happy ending, and it, in some ways, it kind of just gets worse and worse and worse for people. I think that's been a fun thing to explore. It's like, how far can you push these characters before they break? And how far can I, as a comic book writer, how far can I push the readers before they give up and lose their minds? And I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm going to keep pushing. And I've started. Cult of Dracula. All 6 issues are finished. Issue 6 comes out next month, so that'll wrap up that first arc. So I'm deep into the second volume, Rise of Dracula, right now, and it's a totally different tone. It's a huge tonal shift, and it puts things. It forces the read. Well, I guess it doesn't force them, because somebody can always put the book down. But if you do read it and you do continue with the story, it forces you to confront some very harsh existential issues. It deals with the whole, freedom versus safety, and what are you willing to sacrifice to live a comfortable life, and or what are you willing to sacrifice in some cases just to survive? And if you make a decision that that harms this person but benefits these people, is it worth it? Was it a wrong decision to make? And I don't know the answers to those questions yet, but we're definitely going to explore them in the pages of the comic book. And for those who stick along for the ride, I think it's going to be really fun and interesting. And I'm probably going to get a shit ton of hate mail.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
so their tears are your sustenance.
Maybe in a way. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm trying to prepare myself, as the book gets out there, and the television show that's under development right now. As these things get out there, that's going to raise the profile of the book. So people are going to start tearing it apart, and people are going to start looking at it on deeper levels. And I'm terrified of that day when Twitter or Reddit gets a hold of it, and and really just because they can they can jump off on tangents sometimes that that I don't know where they come from, but boy, when they sink their teeth into it, they don't give up. So I know that eventually there's probably going to be some of that coming back. So trying to prepare for it, but not letting fear stop me from writing the book.
So you want to know how I know this podcast is going to make my goals? I've gotten spam on this. Here, please increase your followers by this many.
Yeah, right. That's when you've made it.
Yeah, that's right. No, you made it when people are willing to trash you. They think you're crazy. They say you're these things and that thing. Like, I try to be a nice guy. I'm sure I've come across as a relatively pleasant and nice fellow in the hour or so we've been here. But something like it's okay, right? It's all right. But here's the thing, right? I know I will make it when someone hates what I've done.
Right.
When someone hates what I've done, that's when I know I have made it. That means I have said something so profound that people will both love me and hate me for it. And that's when I know it's like, damn it, I'm on top because I have won. Because now I got people hating my guts because I said this. I own a little piece of their brains. Right? And that might sound incredibly terrible, but the fact is we live in a world that polarity sells. As much as I'm sure you probably hate to acknowledge this, Donald Trump won in a very, very profound way when he was president. He was the most talked about man on earth. And people hated him. People loved him. I think the people that hated him actually hated him a lot more than the people that actually loved him. Because I heard a lot more from people hating him than that loved him. But he won because everybody was talking about him. He owned that headspace in so many people's souls. He still does, right? He still does.
I think Stormfront in the Boys was spot on. Or the show adaptation, not the comic, but when she says you don't need 10 million people to love you, you need 10,000 people to fucking hate you. And I think there's a lot of truth in that, because when people hate something, they hate it with all their heart and all their soul. And especially in the day and age that we live in now with Twitter and Reddit and all in Telegram and all of these different things, I think they kind of stoke the fires of those things that we hate, because suddenly we can be surrounded by thousands of people who hate the same things. And I think that amplifies. And I think that's another one of those existential things that we're going to have to grapple with. Is that healthy? Is that something that we want to be part of our society? Is that protected free speech? And I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer to that, because we could, if you make the wrong decision, if you decide to censor, we could easily become the French Academy, where you're censoring everything that people say and everything that people write and everything that people consume. And from there, it's not a very hard leap to go to 1984 and to go to Fahrenheit 451. But then again, if you let it, if you just let these things go and let the fires of hate be fueled all in the name of free speech, we might end up, with another version of Nazi Germany. So I think we have to make some decisions as a people, as a society, in what we want to be and where we want to go as a society. And those are going to be some really difficult conversations and some really tough decisions to make.
As long as we're the ones making the decisions, that's what it comes down to. To me, I think when I look at, we'll just say Trump. Yeah, he's hated. He's a monster. There's no question about that. But would he have been as big a monster if CNN hadn't featured him so much?
Did the monster make the media, or did the media make the monster?
Well, exactly. And here's the thing, right? And this is kind of like, this is a long form conversation, and I think that feeds a lot of these undertones. If the hatred of things is a result of disenfranchisement, which is something I mentioned earlier, then the question becomes, who is disenfranchising these people? And if it ultimately comes down to one or two sources, then maybe the solution is as simple as going after those one or two sources and shutting them down, right? But that might mean going against things that have benefited greatly from those things that are implemented. I have observed that the North American business practice, when we look at big companies playing with people's hearts and minds, is to look the other way. We don't want to deal with that monster, and we don't want to deal with that problem. The reality of the situation is, I think we've come to this wonderful apex of, if we don't make those decisions now, they will make those decisions for us going forward.
Right. We can't run from our fears. We can't be Arthur. Sometimes you have to stand up and make a choice.
And by the way, folks, I'm not saying that the media is the root of all of our problems, because they're not. That all said, when you look at what is featured, what is considered news, what people are considered buzzworthy or talked about, one of the biggest questions I always have when I look at a news program is, where is the actual news? And because it almost never happens, right? So I when I am asking that question when I'm watching a news program, I have to wonder what is really going on here. Is this journalism, or is this glorified PR? And if it's glorified PR, what are we doing, right? And that's something that, and that's, again, it's not every aspect of journalism you see on television. It's not, but it's something that's there, right? When you look at when we go look at the whole concept of who benefits from things being where they are, it might only be, though, just a handful of people. And if that is the case, then maybe we should have a conversation with those handful of people.
Who knows?
That's just it. Like, that's just me. Maybe I am glorified. Like, maybe I'm making this too simple, right? Because obviously there's other issues at play. But I also tend to go, if you take the gasoline out of the fire, it doesn't burn quite as brightly. Right. Yep. And then maybe when the fire's down a little bit, we can actually talk and maybe just put it out completely. Maybe I'm naively optimistic when I say that, but I actually believe we have more in common than we have different.
I would agree with that, and I think we as humans, we do. There's more that unites us than divides us, and I think we're in a dangerous time where we do focus very heavily on the things that keep us apart and the things that divide us. And no one, we're kind of, if you want to look at it in a meta way, we're kind of in another Cold War where we're afraid to come to the table and talk with people who disagree with us because we're afraid they're going to push the button and nuke us. So what we do instead is we dig our heels in and we say, I'm going to nuke you. And then it just becomes a shouting match, or if not a shouting match, it becomes a very cold stalemate. And I think that is kind of especially at the levels of our elected leaders, I think that's a dereliction of duty. They are hired by us, the people, to make decisions and to deal with difficult subjects and to work together to find common solutions to common problems. And what we've become now is just a divided system of polarized tribes. Republicans and Democrats can't work together. Progressives and conservatives can't talk to each other because nobody's willing to be the first one to bring the olive branch and to come to a common ground. And then if someone does decide to cross the aisle anymore, those people are immediately crucified as traitors to the cause. Well, what's the cause? What's more important, your political party affiliation or the long-term stability of your country? And whatever that answer is, we have to face the fact that we are a pretty evenly divided country. There are almost equal amounts of people on the right and the left in this country. So it's not fair and it's not representative of who we are to empower the right or the left to speak as representing the will of the people, because the will of the people is divided. So we need those people to come together and bring a common solution problem where both sides make compromises.
Well, so unpacking all that, because at least there's a lot there, comes down to three things. You said the first thing, compromising, which implies listening.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter which side of the fence you sit on something. There's a reason for it. So listening to those reasons, even if you find them laughable, right, is, I think, a good policy, because if they are a laughable reason that you can explain and talk to, and then maybe we get into maybe it's just as simple as that, or maybe they have a point. You can be right. You can have an opinion. You can have an opinion about being pro-vaccination right now and be a little concerned that you're putting an experimental drug out there right now. Right? There's a nuance to that, right? It's not saying that, I understand people's decisions, whatever they make, but I don't feel that's an unjust concern right now, right? So, so having a conversation about where the compromise on that, right? Okay, you got a concern here, but we want people to be safe. So maybe why don't we do something like this? And then see a year from now, we reevaluate and kind of see if it's working. And if it's working, then we'll figure something. We'll go from there. And if it's not, we can try something else. So that's just a simple. Let's listen to each other. Let's address some concerns and some things, and go, hey, right. That's the third thing. Nuance.
Mm-hmm.
Almost no issue is black and white. Nothing is black and white. Everything has, everything has a black, not a black and white. Everything has a little shade of gray to it.
Mm-hmm. And I would agree with that.
Yeah, and so because we don't live in a perfect world.
Mm-hmm.
We don't. So instead of dealing with those nuances, we simplify things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. I just mentioned that example. Let's go another one, maybe a little less jarring to people today. Conservatives aren't forward thinking. Yes, but we're still concerned about our personal liberties. That's a classical argument, but it's just one of the. It's valid. Doesn't mean that everything the conservative is doing right now is right. But having on the same token, if there is no personal liberties, what are you fighting? What kind of world are you living in?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, and it becomes, it's a discussion of, where does where does personal liberty and responsibility to the commons, where do those things meet and where do they diverge? Because now I don't know if this quote was actually from Benjamin Franklin, but it's often attributed to him. But it's very poignant to what we're discussing. Your right to swing your fist ends when it hits my face. And, so I think that's the like with vaccination, for example, yes, you do have a fundamental human right to decide what sort of medical treatment you receive. I mean, my friends on the left aren't going to like to hear me say this, but that is the foundation of Roe versus Wade, that you as a human being have the right to make decisions about what you and your doctor decide is best for your health. So people who are opposed to vaccination, as much as I disagree with those people and as much as I don't understand those people, they do have the right to make that decision for themselves. Now, what my friends on the right are not going to like hearing me say is, if you choose to make that decision not to vaccinate yourself, then you also have to accept the consequences of there are things that you're not going to be able to do. You shouldn't, if you're unvaccinated, you shouldn't be able to get on an airplane. You shouldn't be able to get on the subway. You shouldn't be able to go to a theater, because you're choosing to separate yourself, to exercise your individual liberty. You're choosing to pull yourself out away from what the science says is the best thing for the overall society. So then you have to accept the consequences of that. You're separating yourself from society, so you have to be separate from society. But people think that freedom is the ability to do whatever the hell you want, and it's not. Freedom doesn't come without responsibility, and I think we're not willing to accept responsibility for our choices, because for whatever reason we've gotten to a place in the world where we don't have to accept the consequences of those choices.
So I'm going to add just two things to something like the vaccination thing. Like I said, I'm not. Once upon a time, I was an anti-vaxxer. Once upon a time. I'm pro-treatment, not necessarily pro or anti-vax, right? If you have a treatment that works for you, I really don't care. That's basically whether it's a vaccine or not. My only regard about today is this: a new technology, a new way of doing it, has basically been put into people. And what I really don't like about it is the whole concept of, I truly do believe a Hippocratic oath is there. I get this is an excessive time, and I truly do get that. That all said, I'm also worried about the fact that essentially, right this minute, everybody's essentially an experiment. And I'm not sure that should be made a law. If it was something that was like a little bit, had like a background and a history, and you could see the pros, the cons, like, yeah, you should have this, I would be a lot more like, okay, I get it. Right? And that's where I think a lot of people like me are kind of like going, I don't know if this is the one I want to be the hill to die on, especially if a couple of years from now we find out it does do something damaging, right? It's very early in the process. It's very early in the process to say that, and that's where a guy like me will look at you and go, it's like, what's the compromise there? Do we take, like, where do we find a way to go to people and go, okay, you're taking a risk. Let's acknowledge this risk. How can we at least compensate or mitigate it to some degree? Because it is a risk. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think, any healthcare decision that you make comes with risks. And what I think that we need to understand is that if the doctors are prescribing this treatment, then they have used their extensive knowledge and their research to determine that the benefits of taking this outweigh the risks of taking it. You may have some side effects. I still get pop-up ads in my head, from Microsoft, but I can deal with them.
No, but this is one of those like nuanced things, right? Like, that's basically how since we've gone down this route, like that's the nuanced thing. I'm not so quick. I want to put this into law for that reason. I don't want this to be another. I'm not going to say vaccine history, but there have been medications in the past that have been very bad for people and when it's gone into the old thing. And this is a mass experiment, and it's kind of scary, right? And that's just my take on it. Now, I might be wrong, and God knows I hope I am. I hope this goes perfect and everybody's great and wonderful. And a couple of years from now, no one cares, right?
Yeah, and I'm of the mind that vaccines are safe. They protect you. We've had a year. We've had a year of testing this, and there have not been a significant number of negative consequences to it. And I think that everyone should get vaccinated. I cannot get to the point where I believe that the government should force people to get them, because I think that's a bridge too far. But I think if you choose not to be vaccinated, then you have to accept the consequences of your choice. That may mean that you have to wear a mask everywhere. That may mean that there are certain places you can't go and certain things you can't do, but that's okay, because you have the freedom to make those choices, but you don't have the freedom to make choices that will hurt someone else.
Let's go to the last point then. This is the only other point of concern. I think, all in all, I could agree with you, provided one thing: the vaccine stays free.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, in a public health emergency,
because this is, I think, the other fear in the back of heads. It's not right now. I think right now, especially, I don't think anyone would disagree with your perspective, really, if they sit there and think about it, especially if it is a temporary stopgap. My concern is a year or two down the line, we're still doing this, and suddenly this free healthcare now costs money. It becomes part of a system. Because once it hits that point, especially in your country, actually, I think that would be any country, but especially in your country, talk about two-tier systems, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that I am a believer. I think that healthcare should be free. It should be accessible by everyone. I don't think that it should ever be about profits and losses. But unfortunately, you have until I wish we did it like Japan did it. To be perfectly honest, you know what Japan does? They still do the Roe versus Wade. They go like this: we have every vaccine known to man, we have every treatment known to man. You and your doctor figure it out. We don't care. That is actually, I think, the best way to do it. Like I said, I think it actually is the best way to do it. And I wish it would completely again, takes the gasoline out of the fire. Now a vaccine is just another medicine. Right, and that's it. No one would care. Like, no one would care. But again, it's become a very profitable industry, and like I said, I think there's this tendency to divide. Like I said, that's that's my big fear when I see something like that. Like, again, I tend to see your side of it more often than not. But again, the provision is it has. If you're going to make someone take something, it has to be free. Absolutely.
It better,
because it's not a. This isn't going and getting a shot of Botox. It's not cosmetic. This is something that saves lives. It is something that is for the public health, and it should be the public's responsibility. And so that means that all of us should be shouldering the burden through our through our taxes to make sure that this gets taken care of. And that's, I don't think that's a very novel concept, because that's the founding principle of why we formed societies. We came together to face problems that we couldn't overcome by ourselves. We needed our friends, we needed our neighbors to help us. Whether it was to defend us against wolves, or whether it was to bring fresh water, or to grow enough crops, or whatever, there were these problems that we couldn't face alone, but together we had a better chance of it. And then, so I think this is one of those problems. We can't conquer COVID alone.
No.
We need each other to get through this.
Yeah. And ultimately, that means we need to be transparent and have a little bit of integrity about where we want to go, and being honest with them. And again, going back to like what we talked about earlier about the fact that like divide and conquer, you can trace a lot of that back to a lack of integrity and a lack of transparency, and that's where people get disenfranchised. And that starts the whole that's why your book exists, my friend.
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely, I'm glad that you picked that up too, because we do in Cult of Dracula, we are in very subtle ways, we are dealing with those issues of freedom, individual liberty versus responsibility. Especially, when you get deeper into the book around issue 4, 5, and 6, and we start exploring Dracula's origins. And it's the ultimate statement of individual liberty. How she chooses to become what she became. But the important thing is, or from my perspective, the important thing is, when she made this choice, it came with consequences. And she has spent the rest of eternity dealing with those consequences. There are no free passes. There's no golden ticket. We're not going to run and take a trip, take a tour of the chocolate factory. If you make a choice in the world of Cult of Dracula, you're going to deal with the consequences, good or bad, that come with that decision.
So I guess, are you okay that I disliked issue 3 a little bit more than I liked issues 1 and 2?
Oh, of course. No, issue 3 is, I think in your review, I read it. I think you hit it pretty well. It's one of those issues that it doesn't necessarily propel the plot forward, but it provides a lot of necessary information so that that prepares you to understand some things that are going to happen. Now, it does have one of the most horrific, pure horror scenes in the entire series. With the nursery rhyme and things. I mean, and I love that aspect of it. But there's a lot of world building and there's a lot of information that comes at you in issue 3. So yeah, I think you got it spot on. It's not necessarily it's an entertaining issue, but it doesn't propel the plot forward.
I'm just saying the first 2 were so much stronger. Your characters were so much more good. As I got to the 3rd issue, it was like, okay, different artists, you're doing something a little different here. And I read it, and it was like, doesn't feel quite as good as the other 2 did. And I read it again, it was like, okay, I think I get why you did it. I think so. Yeah. But so I'm gonna get this. What did you learn during this miniseries? What are you gonna carry with you going forward?
Yeah. I'm sorry, you broke up just a little bit. I didn't hear the.
What did you learn from what did you learn from doing this series? What did you carry going forward?
A lot.
Yeah.
I learned a lot from doing this series. I think the biggest thing that I learned is what I am capable of. I can do this, because every person who's ever dreamed of doing something creative suffers from imposter syndrome. I mean, hell, I do every single day. I'm constantly feeling like I've snuck into this party, and eventually people are going to figure out that I don't belong, and they're going to say, hey, get out of here. But I'm going to enjoy the hors d'oeuvres while I can. But no, I learned a lot about myself, because a lot of the characters in the book they represent different facets of my personality and my life. When you read Cult of Dracula in a weird, twisted way, I'm kind of ripping my chest open and letting you peer inside, because these are a lot of the things that go on in my body and in my head. Obviously represented in very fantastical, symbolic ways, but each character in the book represents some part of me. So I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about what I'm capable of. And I hope that, moving forward, I hope people will see this and they'll learn some things about themselves. They'll turn that mirror inward, but also I hope that they will see, like, hey, if this fuckhead can do it, I can do this. Like, if I can write a comic, trust me, anybody can write a comic book. So there's nothing at all special about me. I'm just a normal kid from Middle Tennessee. And here I am, I'm writing a comic that, more than 100,000 people to date have purchased. I mean, people are actually walking to their comic book stores or driving or whatever and buying my book off of their shelves. If you would have told me that 20 years ago, I would have said you're crazy. There's no possible way anybody's going to want to read what I've written. Well, they are. So, I've learned what's possible in the world if you just put your mind to it, and if you and actually finish the script, finish the project, and amazing things can happen.
Yes, I think also. Picking Dracula was a fun choice, and you did a really, really fun work with it. Like you put in so many little Easter eggs, even in the names of the characters. I was like, okay, man, he knows this. Again, not quite the same thing. I'm doing an Alice in Wonderland retelling with Greek mythology, and I have Alice as Pandora. Nice. So
nice. I like that. That's a great comparison.
Yeah, because the reason I again, nowhere near as successful, and I'm good with that. 100,000 people is awesome, dude. You should be very proud of yourself. But the thing is, what you have to do in a story like that is you got to look at why the story works. Like, that's what you got to do. You got to look at why the story works, and you got to figure out the parts that you can kind of take and make your own. Renfield is, I think, probably one of the most brilliant takes on him I've ever seen, and that's a compliment to you. I never would have imagined that. There's almost a Shakespearean quality to it. I really love the Three Demons of Fate, Three Witches of Fate. Like, I thought, he's a Shakespeare fan when I read that.
Yeah, I might have a theater degree, and I might have produced, I don't know, 2 or 3 dozen Shakespearean performances in my day. So yeah, I've read a lot of Shakespeare.
Yeah. There was like just some of the things you chose there. It's like, and okay, I'm going to ask you if you can't spoil this for you, to say read and find out. Are they the real culprits? Because my favorite thing about Macbeth. I still remember this from my high school. The real villain wasn't Macbeth. It was those 3 witches. They were the villains. Banquo, I think it was Banquo, pissed them off. He pissed them off right away, right? Macbeth was already pissed off, and they manipulated that SOB into doing what he did. They did it, and they did it right in the very beginning of the play. It's like no. It's like Macbeth, in some way. Now you can't completely make this argument because Macbeth is a monster, but he was played to become that monster, and they were the ones that played him. Like, they did it. It's like, and it's like, so I'm gonna ask this because you are a Shakespeare guy. And I think you would do it just because it would be fun for you. Are they the real villains? And you gotta go read and find out. I'm gonna say that's
what I can say to that is, in the world of Cult of Dracula, there's no such thing as a hero or a villain.
Okay. How about I'll say it like this then. This is a little bit more technical here. Are they the antagonist, the hidden antagonist? And
it depends. It depends on your perspective. If you identify with certain characters, then the brides are there to antagonize. And if you identify with other characters, the brides are there to support. So it's perspective and point of view. You can take from it whatever you want. There's no right or wrong answer.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. I think we got an interview here. What do you think?
I think so.
You think so?
Yeah.
Like I said, I actually we have to talk all about it. There's a reason I don't ask standard questions, and the answer is really simple. We talked an hour. We had a good time. I think we had a good time and like discussing.
Yeah, and it didn't seem like it was an hour and a half or whatever. It was just seemed like boom, go right by.
Yeah. So, and the reason being is because I don't. If you actually notice, I didn't ask you a whole lot of questions, and when questions came up, they were just naturally part of the conversations. So interview shows listening to me right now. Here's a little trick. Know the time of your show. If it's 20 minutes or less, questions and answers work. You don't have the time to do a real conversation. 20 to 30 minutes, if the questions are really good, maybe. Anything after 30 minutes, you're screwed.
Yeah, it needs to be conversational.
Yeah, you're screwed, because what'll end up happening is people know how people speak, and it loses authenticity very quickly. People will forgive time, but when you have plenty of time, people will that forgive.
No, they'll tune out. Yeah, they're done. Yep.
That's it. That's why. And I figured we'll go very more story. So listen, if I start my beach Carlton, I send you the Kool-Aid, will you drink it?
Sure. I'll have somebody taste it first.
I promise you, I wouldn't kill you. You might, that person you taste might be, having an imaginary journey to Shambhala. I mean, and you'll be out. Okay. That's okay. I mean, that's just saying. That was it. And if Doris was listening to this, still she'd probably laughing her ass off, right? But yeah, as you can tell, I don't necessarily say I have a lot right myself, but I think I have my basic life philosophy. I think I got it figured out. I think.
Nice.
We'll see. So, issue 6, is that the only thing you got in the can right now, or do you have anything else coming out right now as well?
No. So let's see. So issue 5 comes out this coming week, and then issue 6 comes out next month in August. And then the trade paperback comes out in October. And I'm already deep into writing the second volume, Rise of Dracula. It'll be the second volume of 3 planned volumes. We've got Cult, Rise, and then Reign of Dracula. And I'm working on a take on Frankenstein called Prometheus in Chains. And I'm working on a sci-fi kind of Last Starfighter meets Red Dawn book called Shooter. And I'm working on a amazing feel-good story called Billy Flynn's Long Goodbye. It's not a feel-good story at all. It's very depressing. But yeah, I've got a few irons in the fire. Some things that'll be announced soon that I'm not allowed to talk about yet.
That's fine. I get it. NDAs are a thing, and then that is the way it goes. Congrats on that. So, by the way, that's really cool, and I hope you have fun with that experience. That all said, I think then you should talk about with your next issue. When from there, how people can find you, and I almost have one. Actually, I do have one last question, and then we get to the plugs.
Go ahead, ask.
Are you a Noir fan?
I love Noir. Yes,
I had a hunch.
Very much so.
I had a hunch. I really had a hunch.
I love Noir films. I love books. It's amazing.
I get the feeling that the more nihilistic they are, the better they are for you. I get that feeling. I get that feeling. I mean, we referenced Nietzsche. I can't believe we went from like politics to vaccines to Nietzsche and to we talked about everything.
Yeah, I know, right? It's all over the place. But it all somehow makes sense,
Because again, what you're dealing with, the big theme you're dealing with is disenfranchisement, finding a place to fit in, understanding where that disenfranchisement comes from. And honestly, if in the United States right this minute, right, I mean, the whole vaccine situation is emblematic of this. There's a disenfranchisement that is not completely unjustified, and that has to be rectified at some point if you guys are going to figure it out. Otherwise, someone else will figure it out for you, and I don't think anybody will.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a fair, and that's why that meant relevant. Nietzsche is because of all things his most optimistic quote. But because you do like Nietzsche, like, well, no, this dude is into nihilism, because if there's one thing about Nietzsche, it's all hell. So.
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah. I mean, he's the poster child for nihilism. So.
Yeah. So I mean, just like I had to ask that because, I should introduce you to somebody. I think you'd actually dig them. It might be something for you down the road, but I get the feeling. Okay. Yeah, I think you'd enjoy it. All right. So talk about your book. Tell me where people can find you, and then I'll do the wrap up.
Yeah, so Cult of Dracula #5 hits shelves day after tomorrow. I'm not sure when you're going to air this interview, but from the time we're recording it, it hits shelves day after tomorrow. Okay. And it is a lot of shit happens in this issue. I mean, a lot. This is kind of that penultimate issue that's going to propel us into the finale. And
beware the flying turds, for they are plenty.
Yes, exactly. There's a lot going on in this issue. We learn a lot about Dracula. We learn a lot about our characters, and we get to see. This is going to be the first issue where we really get to see the cult. We've been talking about the cult for 4 issues now, and in 5 we really get to start to see them. And once the train leaves the station, it doesn't slow down all the way through the end of 6. So I hope you guys will go to your local comic book shops and pick it up. I know that a lot of shops have been selling out of them. So because you can look on eBay, and issues 1, 2, and 3 are selling for sometimes crazy money. But the books are getting hard to find. But go to your local comic book shop, pick it up, and if you have trouble, you can message Source Point Press. You can buy directly from them. You can reach out to me through Facebook, through the Cult of Dracula page, and I'll try to help you find a store in your area that has it. Because if nobody's picking up the book, then they're not going to let me keep writing it. So, but thankfully,
very hands-on on that. So, do you have like a Twitter, Instagram people can find you at?
So we do have Instagram. We do have Facebook. They're both at Cult of Dracula Comic. A Twitter exists. It's at Cult Comic, which I think is probably the coolest Twitter handle in the world. I don't use it because I avoid Twitter like the plague. I'm terrified of Twitter. Those people scare the shit out of me. And I write scary stories for a living, and Twitter scares me. So we do have a Twitter. I think somebody from Source Point probably maintains it and posts on it. But yeah, so if you want to interact with me, Facebook or Instagram are probably the best ways to do that. I love talking to people. I love chatting about the book. I mean, even some of the best conversations I've had with people started out with them telling me what they hated about the book. So I love to interact with people, and I'm not going to fault you. Like you said, you didn't enjoy issue 3 as much as number 1 and number 2. That doesn't upset me. That's something that I'll file away in the back of my head, and I'll think about, okay, how did I structure the story in issue 3? And, what did I do, that lost some people, and how can I fix that moving forward? I take constructive criticism very well. It comes from my days as an actor and working in the world of theater. The only way to make your performance better is for the director to tell you what you're doing wrong. So people who want to interact with me, even if it's to tell me they hate me, that's cool. We'll talk.
Big heart. They'll give you a big heart too.
Absolutely.
And I'll send you some Kool-Aid. Drink it all.
Kool-Aid.
Yeah,
I do like Kool-Aid.
So, and that who doesn't like Kool-Aid? Like I said, his assistant will like my Kool-Aid. I promise.
Yep.
Anyways, that all said, everybody, this is my first episode this week. I have only 2 more this week, as I'm taking it easy in the middle of the week. Rodney Fike for an independent comic is going to be up, and then my drink and draw is going to be special this week, as I'm teaching somebody how to draw for the first time ever. It'll be Joe Compton joining the show on Friday.
Nice,
guys. Yeah. If you had told me a year ago, I would have been doing like drink and draws or drawing bids where my stuff was actually up for sale. I would have laughed at you, and now.
And now here you are.
This is my 8th. I'm approaching my 9th month of drawing next month. That's it. So
nice. Good for you, man. That's awesome.
Well, hey, this is the time. Like I told you. This time. So a time like this tends to do 2 things. Trauma. Like for 80% of people, when the pressure dissipates, so there's the trauma. Some people never forget, and then there are people like me who have looked into the face of death and become stronger for it. So I get crazier. So right. I don't get like it doesn't break me. It just like that Joker quote, what doesn't kill you makes you stranger. Well, my give a damn. What doesn't kill me makes me care less about consequences in the world. It's a healthy respect for the fragility of night and just embracing it. And that's another conversation. If you ever want to come back on the show, we'll have.
I would be happy to.
Yeah.
I've got to run soon because I've got another podcast coming up tonight. But I would love to come back.
No problem. I'm just gonna wrap up and then we'll call it. So anyway, watching, hit the subscribe button on my Twitch, hit the YouTube channel, like and subscribe there. Alice Zero, the book I mentioned earlier, is up for the Elgin Award this year for poetry. You can definitely take a look.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Malice 1 comes out November 1st. Stay inspired, keep shining in the dark, and I'll see you guys tomorrow night.